What is going on, everyone? We are live with a brand new setup, obviously. The camera is going to be right here. It's GoPro. Computer's down here. So if you see me looking down, I'm basically just looking at the comments coming in and basically you guys messaging us. And this is something that I've talked about wanting to do for a long, long time was this Bass and Bourbon, right? Which is just pretty much candid conversation, hanging out with you guys, talking fishing. And it's really going to be fishing focused, right? But
Yeah.
it's not as detailed as like diving into a specific technique or like application, right?
It's not as structured. That's a
Yeah.
good one. Because I think like what I had always talked to Ben about, what we discussed for a few years now is
This is literally like 3 years in the making.
is when we would have our annual boys trip up in Traverse City and we would talk about, man, like if you just turned a camera on right now with all of us sitting around at the end of the day drinking beer and talking fishing and how the day went. Like it's not structured, it's not organized, but the amount of information that you could glean out of that conversation.
Well, in a similar fashion, right? Like one of the coolest YouTube videos I ever saw was Brian Thrift sitting with a couple of other guys around the table, and they were talking about the very first time they ever saw certain baits,
Yeah.
like the Whopper Plopper or the Senko. And I was like, man, if you could be a fly on the wall in some of those conversations, the amount that you would learn, but also the kind of interesting topics that you see people discuss. So
Yeah.
it's pretty cool. And that's going to be basically the format. So if you guys have any questions or things that you guys want to chime in on as well, it's super interactive. I'm also going to be uploading this as a podcast to my a podcast to all of the streaming platforms. So that's Spotify, Google Play, Apple, and all of the other streaming podcasting platforms. So it's going to be live there as well for you guys to go listen to at a later date. If you guys hear, babies crying or dogs barking, it's part of life. Like we're at my house, so that's just kind of the way things are going to roll. But here in just a minute, we're going to do the little intro. I see some people coming in, and I just want to say Merry Christmas to everyone. I know Nick Rose is in there, Al Kavanaugh, Daniel Chops Tucker.
Oh, pork chops.
And all pork chops, and then the rocket surgeon. So there's 21 people in here. Without further ado, we're just going to kind of get into this thing. So I'm going to shoot the little introduction to the podcast, and then you hear start rolling. What is going on, everyone? My name is Benjamin Nowak, and this is the very first episode of Bass and Bourbon Conversations, where we talk everything bass fishing with a little bit to drink. And Nathan's got his classic latte with him.
Just a good old Bush.
Tonight's going to be Bass Bourbon and beer. The bourbon is not actually a bourbon tonight. It's a whiskey. So we're going to start out on a real strong note. But I got this for Christmas. It's Jack Daniel's Tennessee Tasters selection, which is basically a limited edition bottle with Jamaican allspice. So that's what I'm going to be drinking tonight. I'm not going to get too lit. I'm just going to be hanging out and have a little drink and encourage you guys, if you drink, to join along. If you don't, grab yourself a water or orange juice and hang out and listen to the conversation. But what we're going to be talking about tonight is basically 2021 in review. Like you and I shot some ideas back and forth throughout the week, and this is kind of what we had determined was going to be a good topic, but also something that we can talk about because we fished quite a bit this year together. And yeah, man, it's interesting to hear our differing perspectives on a very similar
because
like
season. We were going through, like, just before this started, we were like, I took a couple of notes, but not too much, and we were just kind of like diving into some of the topics, like the loose questions that we had asked each other prior. And it's like, man, listening to the other one, we had some opposite perspectives on certain things, but we had some very similar perspectives on certain things. And it was just kind of interesting. And as we dive into it, we'll get into like the nitty gritty. But as a broad topic, I guess, like, how did your 2021 go for you, in your opinion?
That's the thing, is like you and I we fished together a decent bit. We're on the boat together a ton this year. Like you finally had some freedom to not be in my boat all year long, which is good. But man, dude, my year was not great. Like from an overall perspective of actually going out and catching fish and accomplishing things that I thought I would be able to accomplish, it just like nothing seemed to fall into place. Like bites were really hard to come by, especially after about May. Like things just kind of really slowed down, and I never really found that groove again. And so it was kind of tough. Like I learned a couple new baits. I did okay on some places, but like I just didn't ever get back in that groove and like really, really feel like things were rolling for me. And so I don't know, man. It wasn't. I wouldn't say it did terrible. Like I don't want to say it was my worst year, but it just wasn't. Things never clicked for me.
Yeah. And like for me, what was interesting is like my year started out and I'm like, oh my God, this is the best year I'm ever gonna have. Like I will say something about you and I both is we caught them from ice out to ice up. I think that's a huge success that we can like celebrate in 2021. We caught them from literally when the ice was off. We caught them in March,
Yeah.
April, June, May, July, August, September, October, November, and December. And not necessarily caught them well, but like we caught fish all not 9 months.
Like it was literally like we were watching for the ice to leave a specific area
Yeah.
to go fish, and we caught them then. Caught them till the end of the year. And like,
yeah,
we had pretty good successes. I actually think I only blanked. I think that very last trip of the year.
yeah. And I caught one, and that was literally like, okay, we're good. Like we caught our one. We're done for today.
Yeah, and that's a good point. It's good to look at the successes of the year.
Yeah, and just like not to toot our own horns, but to genuinely look back and like see the improvements. Like, do you remember when we would go out and like the beginning to middle of April, like we couldn't catch them till the spawn almost.
Right, and it wasn't just one location either. Like we went and we did the smallmouth thing, and then we did some largemouth stuff, and went and caught some big largemouth flipping a jig early in March. And then
I got
thinking of it that way, dude. That's 2.5 months away.
I know. Like we were just texting back and forth about like the winter is going to be so long, but like, man, we really shortened up that downtime, which is a good that's a positive, right? Like it wasn't necessarily a goal, but it's a positive that came out of 2021.
Yeah, to actually go out and fish more than we expected to fish.
And to go on like that, it started off with a bang. Like one of my big goals every year is, for the past few years at least, has been to catch a 6-pound largemouth and a 6-pound smallmouth in the same season.
Yep.
Now for the past few years, like a 6-pound smallmouth, granted that's a big fish, but we've been able to do it, right? Like it's almost become an expected one. And I started off
to catch one 6-pound smallmouth, it's like almost an expectation, right?
Yeah.
Like not even a goal anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, continue.
Yeah. And I caught that 6-pound largemouth like in what, April? End of April, beginning of May?
Well, I think, like you said, man, I think I had a shot at a 6-pounder, or maybe I caught a 6-pound too. That
at the beginning of the year.
Scale.
And you and I honestly have never been big. Like we've never caught big largemouth. Like we've caught them.
Yeah, we caught them, but never like giant.
Yeah, and like we started out the year, we're like, oh my God, this is gonna be the best year ever. And then it kind of just filtered into like I got into tournaments and you kind of did your thing and whatever, and the rest of the year was kind of like so. Yeah, it was so.
We had a good little tournament effort.
Yeah, we did. Right? We wrecked him in that tournament.
What about like overall your year though? So like, if you look at your season, were there things you left on the table?
Yes. That's why I was so gung-ho about the end of this, like that last trip that we had. Like you guys wanted to go home by like 10. I'm like, no, we're staying. We are staying.
Yeah, that was
it was miserable. It wasn't fun, but like I had it in my head, like I'm leaving something on the table, right? Like I left that 6-pound smallmouth out there.
Mm-hmm.
I had caught some big ones this year, but I didn't get on that 6-pound mark. And that was frustrating for me, to be honest. The deal with the boat, like you mentioned earlier, like having the freedom of finally getting an outboard, but that took me until almost August. Imagine if I would have had that all year.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about that either.
Yeah, I didn't get that until literally the first week of August.
You were trolling around for the first portion of the year.
Yeah. So if you guys don't know, like Ben had alluded to, like us fishing together constantly is because I had a boat, but I didn't have an outboard motor. I had a boat with a trolling motor on it.
Yep.
And up until August of this year, I was literally running an 18-foot Ranger this whole spring and summer with just a trolling motor. And I made it work, but,
Yeah, but it impacts the way that you can fish, too.
Mm-hmm.
not only the places you can fish, but like the way you can physically move around lakes to fish.
Yeah, well, that's something that I got into, like when I was looking at the notes we were talking about, like um, something that I improved on in 2021 is like literally getting the boat and having the mobility.
Do you think it helped you or hurt you? Because your style is very much so like I'm going to pick apart an area,
see it did both,
and I'm going to like dive into this area and break down everything I need to know to catch big ones and numbers here.
So what it did for me is one of the biggest improvements I saw is I almost never felt like I left the lake without having a pattern. Whether it was
Yeah.
a week pattern, like you remember when I was going up to Traverse City and I'm like, I don't understand these smallmouth. Like they're on sand
Yeah.
and they're on sand. They're not on a little bit of grass in the sand. They're not on a little bit. They're just on sand. But I knew they were on sand, right? Like it's a weak pattern, but I understood it by the end of the day because I was kind of able to move around. But at the same token, something that I noticed is when I get dialed in like that and it doesn't happen right away, like on tournament day or whatever, I start spinning my wheels and I want to bounce around. And like I have 8 other spots that should be firing.
How many tournaments did you fish outside of what we did?
I fished
3 or 4.
No, more than that.
More than that.
I probably fished a good 7, 8, 9 Wednesday, Tuesday.
Oh,
Thursday
that's
nighters.
a good point. That's a good point.
I fished a lot of weeknight tournaments, and then I fished all the English Choice on Sugar, and then I fished the Leelanau, and I fished the Cass tournament. So I probably fished 4 full day derbies, and then
I forgot about those.
probably a dozen weeknighters. You know.
Yeah, so basically having the ability to move around and like check a bunch of different spots.
Yeah.
So is that a benefit? I mean, it is, but for your style.
And on top of that, not knowing, right? Like, I don't know how to manage that, right? Because I've never had that freedom before. It's like you give a kid their driver's license and all of a sudden they can go anywhere, but they don't realize, hey, I got to make enough gas money to go places, right? I mean, seriously, like if you have 30 spots, you can't run them all in a tournament. You know, it's like,
well, especially if you don't. I don't want to say you don't know how to manage areas, but you don't. This was really your first year of going out and being able to fish some of these lakes or some of these spots, and so you'd have a milk run of spots that you didn't even know if they were good for a tournament,
or how to milk run them, right?
Right.
Seriously,
right. That's such an interesting topic in itself, right? Because like understanding spot management, just in general, but we won't get into that tonight. But
yeah,
how do you think it's strengthened you?
Just the mobility, right? Like being able to bounce around and understand, like on bigger lakes in particular. Like to be honest, I still fished like I had a trolling motor this year because I didn't fish very many big lakes, right?
Yeah.
A handful of times that I did, it was nice to know, like for that tournament on Leelanau that I fished with Mike. Okay, well, they're on this pattern. I got something like that 3 miles down the lake. I got another spot that's like that 2 miles that way. Let's bounce through them. And in that tournament in particular, it was, you pick one off here, one off there, one off here, one off there. If you're stuck to one spot, then you're kind of SOL,
Yeah.
And being able to maneuver around and not only when things are going well, but when things are going wrong, be able to.
I think so. For me, like one thing that I did really poorly this year is mismanaged locations.
How so?
Because I start to think of like when Brennan was here, and not only did I try to force a bite, but I would also like, if that specific bite wasn't happening, I didn't like try to look for it in the area that I know it should be happening in.
Yeah.
I would like run. I would just like leave. I would either pack the boat up and go to like a different area in the lake, or I would just run like 10 miles out of the way.
Yeah.
And I think that comes down to knowing it's fishing areas too much. It's fishing like parts of the bay too much, and having too much information and being like,
I know it should be happening, but it's not.
Yeah, it's not happening. And then just trying to force it, right, and missing it entirely. So I did a really poor job. I did the same thing in Wiggins in the tournament. It seems like that was the like key fact, like key thing that continued to happen throughout the season.
Yeah.
No matter where or when, I would just try to run too much or try to like not just settle in and like trust that I can make fish bite.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
well, that's the hard thing though, is like, when do you stay? When do you go? Right? Like,
I don't know the answer. I wish I,
don't
did because
either.
I don't know the answer. Right? Like that's been my biggest struggle over the last year or 2 years, where I don't feel like I'm super comfortable
Mm-hmm.
because I have so much knowledge.
Yeah, like it's
Like,
almost a bad thing, right? It's
yeah.
like, I have so many spots to run. I have so many bites that I've done well on in the past, and it's not tooting your own horn. It's just like, when you've been out there, you spent that much time, like you've had success on different areas and doing different things, but then you get bogged down in, well, it should be happening.
You look at what we did. We've talked about this a lot. Is the very first trip we take somewhere as being like one of our best.
Mm-hmm.
Like the first handful
Yes.
of trips being one of our best.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have no information, you have no knowledge, you have to literally fish the exact conditions you get.
Yeah, you fish your gut a lot better when you do that. Yeah.
I just think that's how you make better decisions, is when you fish the conditions rather than trying to force something.
Mm-hmm.
Because you've been out there hundreds of times over the last 3 years.
Yeah.
I mean,
seriously.
for real.
Yeah. Well, it boils down to, like, how do we end the year? Is literally like, we fish that one spot that it's one cast, and you're like, Dirds, how have you been catching them out here when I'm not here, like not having live scope? And I'm like, dude, I know they're here. I'm just gonna make the same cast, and eventually one's gonna get stupid and eat it.
Yeah, eventually one's gonna be dumb enough to actually come up and eat it.
Right, and that's a time when it pays off, but at the same point, like, when it's not that, what are you doing?
Right, exactly.
What are you doing?
Yeah, what else are you going to do?
Yeah.
But at that point, it's almost too hard to figure out a different pattern because you're so in your own head about what should be happening.
Yeah.
What about, like, what were your biggest takeaways from the year? Like, your biggest ahas? Like, if you look back at the season, what have you noticed the most?
One of the biggest ahas that I had this year is, like, just as a general, is I really learned how to read bait. Not necessarily read fish, but read bait and understand bait activity. Sometimes you're not necessarily looking for fish. You're looking,
like, what does that mean?
Like, a perfect example is, when you hear guys talk about punching or fishing lily pads, and they're always talking, like, you pull up and it sounds like Rice Krispies. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
I've never pulled it. And it wasn't like, when I got on that good frog bite this summer, like, the certain stretches of pads that I had, they were like very small stretches, but you're like, oh, aha, there's the Rice Krispies that they're always talking about.
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily in the pads. It was like, it was
that
different.
more of a largemouth thing for you, or was that a smallmouth
No.
thing too?
Smallmouth, because like when me and Mike fished that tournament on Leelanau and those wigglers.
Oh yeah. So explain this story to everyone listening.
So I had a certain area that I knew was very good, and we started on it. And the thing about this area that I like about it is it gets a lot of wind and it's a feeding flat. And I don't care, I'll say it. You can catch them on an A-rig. You can catch them on an A-rig right there. And Ben's chuckling because he knows that I'm not afraid to say it's an A-rig because there's certain other stuff. But when that wind blows on it, it gets so smallmouth moving that bait around. Well, we pulled up in the morning and it's dead flat calm. There's no wind, but there was a really strong wind the night before. And we're fishing down, and this is where, like, when you get in your own head, like I was saying, and I wanted to bounce around because it wasn't firing, and I had other spots that we could run. And Mike literally said, he's like, Dirds, like, this is a good spot. Let's just stay here. Give it an hour,
So, but what made you stay there? Right? Like, I don't actually know this part of the story. Like, what made you stay in that spot?
Is because it's a good spot. But it's prior knowledge, and I'm not going to say it was my spot. My buddy Brent kind of showed me the area, and I was able to kind of compound on it, and We fished through the area, and Mike's like, "Gosh, look at all these wigglers." And what wigglers are is um, like bug hatch carcasses, like little worms, and it was like a slick. And what this
On top of the water?
on top of the water.
Huh.
And what we noticed is, so this wind the night prior had blown all of these wiggler carcasses into an inside turn. And what it did is it revealed, like, literally, okay, that's the juice. That's where they're sitting. And we saw
was that your spot? Like, was that your spot
that was the spot.
before?
That was
like,
no, it wasn't. I had an area, but this was the spot on the spot. Remember how I told you we could make that pass and we'd pluck one off?
Yeah.
And pluck one off? What that wiggler slick showed is, okay, this is the spot on the spot. Who's that?
Hella says we need a love seat so we can be a little closer. I was trying to make sure this wasn't turning into a casting couch.
Yeah.
So
we literally went to flip on the camera. It's like, wow, I've seen this video before.
Oh God, that's funny. That's what this is all about. That's what the Bass and Bourbon conversation is really about, is all the funny stupidity associated with it.
But anyways, those wigglers showed like where the spot on the spot was. And it made me think back to trout fishing. If you've ever heard the saying, foam is home. And what it is, okay, when you get through riffles and it creates those little foam bubbles. Like, you remember seeing it when we fished Sanford and Wixom, and you get the discharge from the dam. Foam is home. It's where that foam settles, right? It's the current eddies. And that's where those fish are going to sit.
I'm so bad at fishing moving water, guys. It's not even funny.
Well, those wigglers showed that exact spot, and you could see like little minnows flicking on them. And Mike literally flipped that dark sleeper out there, and it didn't even hit the bottom in one of those little slicks where the minnows were flicking. Just like.
So we did a very similar thing, actually, with Mike.
Yeah.
Fishing Hubbard.
Mike's a good fisherman, man. we need to have him on Bass and Bourbon. He can knock down a couple of Captain and Cokes.
Oh, God, yeah. He would. He'd put down the whole thing in Captain. No, but we were fishing mayfly hatch.
Yeah.
Up on Hubbard. And I was flipping and fishing for bedding fish because there were still late bedding fish, and I really wanted to get this done and whatever. Mike is literally like, he sees these mayfly slicks. He's taking I don't know if it was a Berkeley bait. The Jaywalker style bait. Like topwater spook.
A big spook.
Cast that thing forever away from the boat.
That Jaywalker does cast a
forever
mile.
away from the boat. And was catching them on topwaters because he would be targeting these mayfly slicks while I'm flipping for bedding fish.
Mm-hmm.
And it got to a point at the end of the day, it was too rough to see the bedding fish. And we would just chase these slicks around to see like where they were being pushed overnight.
Yeah.
You didn't want the new ones. You didn't want like the massive new mayfly slicks. You wanted like the ones that had been pushed by the wind just overnight.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting actually, because I never thought about that as I start to look back at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things that I'm always like, that's my aha after I get really pissed off.
Mm-hmm.
On one of the days,
I'm going to catch these bedding fish. And this guy just sitting in the back of the boat, flailing around.
Like what happens when I'm on my way home.
Yeah.
I suck, right? And I'm like, oh my God, there were mayfly slicks all over the lake, and I forgot to even chase it, right? So that's really interesting.
But that was one of those things, like, if you don't have that co-angler in the boat that's like, hey, settle down.
Aaron Diddy says, crack a latte for him.
Hell yeah, dude. I know you like those lattes too. That's my dude.
Hey, no bourbon in the latte can. I'm not even drinking bourbon tonight. Just a little recap of what I'm drinking. I got this for Christmas. It is Jack Daniel's Tennessee Taster Jamaican Allspice. It's like a small one-off deal that they did where they keep doing like these small experimental runs. And so it's 100 proof Jamaican Allspice. And Dirds is the...
Well, this here, boys, this is what we call a Busch Light, which is brewed from the coldest American waters with the finest American hops by the Anheuser brothers. It's not necessarily a small batch, but I would call it a special run. Just really high quality, high quality booze.
Next up on our two dudes, one couch. Kind of building on like our aha moments, like for me, one of the other things that I think about, and this actually plays into that, is the fact that wind direction really matters.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't pay attention a lot to wind direction over the past couple of years,
Yeah.
especially on the Great Lakes. I would just look at which direction it wasn't coming out of. And
Yeah.
that's
Which side am I going to fish? The
Yeah,
one
which
that the
side am I
wind's
gonna
not
fish?
hitting?
But like fishing smaller bodies of water, like really seeing and understanding how it plays on some of these fish and how it sets them up and how it moves the bait around and how it positions them with current, even on natural style bodies of water.
Dude, I'm just giggling because I got so many like same instances that I realized this year.
Yeah, this year was a huge player, and understanding like the way that wind impacts like pinch points and how it positions fish on the backside of hard drops.
Yep.
And so like that's a big thing for me, especially going into next year. And the way that I found this out was actually because I was idling around and I started noticing these giant pods of tiny microbait. Like I don't even know what they were.
Was that in that like those
Yeah.
pin minnows in that tournament?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Super small pin minnows. And that was really the key indicator. And it helped me understand. Brennan, I guarantee I said something dumb. Ripping through my wife's claws.
Attaboy,
Oh,
Brennan.
But no, it's just understanding the way that wind direction plays a huge key, and kind of building on that, compounding on that. Exact opposite is how much noise has an impact on fish.
So I'll break that down into 2 anecdotal stories.
Okay.
So I got 3 things. First off, Brennan, shout out to you because I remember the first time I met you, you offered me a 70-degree Bud Light, and I appreciate that with all my heart. Second off, wind. My little sneaky largemouth lake,
Yeah.
my main lake bar that I fish with that milfoil cabbage mix, that spot only fires when there's a wind out of the south. You can catch them off it when it's not blowing out of the south, but when that wind blows out of the south, they fire on it hard.
The other thing is how it positions them on that specific spot, right? Like, especially in grass, I've noticed with smallmouth, they'll move around a spot depending on the way that wind's hitting it and like the amount of sun. Brennan's on here and he witnessed it with me. Like when we went out and had that crazy crankbait day, the biggest thing was like the wind had to be blowing out of the east, like southeast, across this bar, and we had to be able to position in a certain way to be able to cast. I guess with the wind at our backs was the way we ended up figuring it out, but like when we were bringing the bait with the wind direction,
Yeah.
we caught a lot more fish. So,
and my thing, the place that I figured out, I think what it does is it pushes those, like how those bait fish were eating those wigglers, right? I think what it does is it pushes all that suspended scuds and all the whatever shit that the bluegill are eating.
Yeah.
Because, on that lake, they're super keyed in on bluegill. I think what it does is it pushes that out of the basin and then it pushes it up on that bar. And I think that's why that spot fires with that south wind.
I'm so intrigued by some of this stuff, right? Like I wish I
don't know, but that's what I
makes
think.
pros so dang good.
Yeah.
Is their ability to take like minute information and really like compound on it fast.
Yeah.
But it's
And then what was the other one? Noise. Oh, like this spring when I was chasing, doing that sight fishing deal.
Yep.
Oh, Will Daniels, what's
Will
up, dude?
Daniels. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, Will. I know you said you had to hop out, but just want to say that to you. And everyone else that's joined as well. Merry Christmas to you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're not excluding
Yeah.
We're not excluding you.
I just say that because I've met these people in person.
Yeah.
Will and Brennan in particular.
Yeah.
And then the noise deal. When I was doing that sight fishing deal this spring on that really, really tough fishery, catching those smallmouth up a real isolated hard cover, it was amazing to see, A, when I turned my graph off, what happened, how close you get to them, and B, when I'm going to give away a little nugget for all you viewers if you're listening.
The lake name?
No.
Oh.
You've already given that out.
Yeah.
But your trolling motor, when you would hold your trolling motor on constant, you could follow those fish down the break. As soon as you let off and it was a broken noise, like your transducer clicking, click, 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 click.
Mm-hmm.
But when it was just your trolling motor, it's like when you're trying to sleep with a fan, right? You can sleep with a fan on, but I can't sleep with the clock ticking. As soon as that noise would break,
That's because you're
boom.
weird.
Yeah, well, whatever. Anyways,
that's real though. I get that.
as soon as I lay off the trolling motor and turn the noise off, those fish would break.
So like that's where I
Out
think
into
the
deep
power
water.
of that's where I think the power of hydro wave comes in. It's not
Mhm.
necessarily like to draw the fish in.
Yeah,
I think it's
to mask your
interesting,
sound.
but it's literally to mask your sound. And the reason they have so many different sounds is so that way you can match the fish that you're
Mm-hmm.
fishing for. But it's a really interesting concept. Do you think hydro wave would make a difference if you were running a trolling motor, or is it still?
I just think honestly, being as quiet as possible, like
Which for me is I laugh because Brennan knows, the guys watching know, like I slam that trolling motor side to
yes,
side
you
looking
do,
for
and you know how
fish.
many times that I'm in the boat with you, and I'm like, Ben, stop,
That's so
lay off of it.
That's so funny, but it's really true. Like
Mm-hmm.
the distance that fish can feel that presence
Mm-hmm.
is incredible, especially when you start to get on really pressured bodies of water, which don't make sense why they're pressured, but especially when you get on really pressured bodies of water, it makes a huge impact.
Mm-hmm.
What are the things that you feel like you did, you improved on this year? Like, what are the things that, like, similar to that topic that you were able to expound upon?
I think the biggest thing that I learned this year is like reaction baits. And like you said earlier, like my biggest strength is being able to find an area and just mine it for all that it's worth. Like pluck. If there's 20 fish on there, I'm going to catch 19 of them. You know what I mean?
How'd you use reaction baits in those situations? Was it finding the key areas? Was it pulling apart the key area?
What's interesting is like, even though I'm fishing a reaction bait fast, a lot of times, like I was still sitting on an area and making the same, like that 5 that I caught on a crankbait on that little lake. I was like, I had 4 rocks lined up that I'd found on my side scan, and I'm like, find the rocks, find the rocks, find the rocks, find the rocks, and I found them, and then I would hit the rock, and then I hit a piece of grass and made that rip with the reaction bait, and then caught that fish, and it's like, boom. Okay, maybe I sat on that spot for a while and made like multiple methodical casts, but to catch it on a reaction bait, which is something I had never had confidence in, it was something new to me, and it wasn't, just a crankbait. I fished a jerk bait a lot this year. A crankbait, a jerk bait, a spinner bait, things that I don't typically throw really worked their way into my arsenal this year. And I smashed them on. I mean, those were probably my 3, other than a jig.
Another power fishing technique.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm kind of, for me, it's almost opposite, right? Like you learned how to fish fast through areas.
Yeah.
I feel like I learned how to slow down and pick apart areas.
Seriously.
Right? Like I learned how to just trust that I know what I'm doing. I'm
Mm-hmm.
seeing fish on the graph. I'm seeing them respond on my electronics. I know they're here. Have a little bit of patience and just figure it out.
Yeah. Because
I would always fish fast, and like if it wasn't happening, that trolling motor's coming up and I'm going, right? And I wasn't fishing fast like Brian Thrift fishes fast, where he like is very, very thorough.
yeah,
I was just fishing fast.
they're here, but they're not catchable. So I'm gonna leave.
Right.
And I definitely agree with you. Like I've seen that in you, where I think the biggest struggle as bass fishermen that we have is you always hear like 90% of fish live in 10% of the water. If you can find that 10%, now how do I sit here and how do I figure out how to catch them? And a perfect example of that, and I don't know if it's because we started fishing with him more, but that freaking dude Caleb, man, rubbing off on you.
Yeah, Caleb's really good.
Caleb's
really,
really good.
Picking a spot apart, and just if he knows that it is a good area, he can pick it apart and make it a better area than I think it should be.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what makes pros so good, right? Like pros go to bodies of water they've never been to and can figure out patterns that guys aren't doing, not necessarily on the most community hole areas.
Yeah.
Or like they win on areas that aren't necessarily like popular because they look good, they fish right, but a lot of guys fish through them because the fish aren't super,
they're not easy to catch.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what Caleb's really good at.
Mm-hmm.
And like the more we fish with him, the more the more you start to see him doing that, and like you can adapt it to your arsenal. And this goes into like what Nick Rose talks about, and Nick and I have talked quite a bit via Instagram with current on natural lakes and using wind to really help position fish. And Aaron Diddy mentions this as well. As his big like eye opener on Erie was understanding the way that current affects bait fish and bass and their movements around Erie.
Yeah,
That's one thing like Caleb is really really good at is understanding like this area should be good because of the wind direction and because of these 4 other factors. Even though it's not necessarily like maybe a spot on the lake, like the number one, he can make it like a spot.
Yeah.
And his ability just to sit there and trust and fish through it and really break it down is, I think, what makes him.
Well, and part of it too is like just being stubborn and like beating your head against the wall and like, you know what, it's not going to be easy, but I'm gonna I can see him there. You know, I can see him on my live scope. They're there. How do I catch
the Chickamauga thing?
Yeah.
I really think it's his ability to fish on Chickamauga where it's like always hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, no, like it's always easy.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
yeah, because like Alex has said the same thing too when they come up here like, God, these fish are dumb.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not like that all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You're right though. Huge shout out to Victor. My man Victor just dropped in a super chat, man. I really appreciate it. You don't have to do it, but Merry Christmas, my man.
Nice.
Victor's on all the time. So I gave a huge shout out to Victor and basically everyone that's watching. It means a ton. So I'm glad you guys are enjoying.
Thanks, Victor. What a guy.
Talk to me too about like, I think fishing with you, like you don't give yourself enough credit. That's one thing that you've always been really good at. Yeah, I know you're big-headed.
Yeah, hat's getting a little tight.
No, but you've always been really good at going and fishing an area and really, really picking it apart for everything that it's worth.
Yeah.
Areas that a lot of guys fish through.
Mm-hmm.
So like fishing together with you has helped me with that as well. Do you think you improved upon that this year or got worse at that or indifferent?
I'd say having the mobility aspect hurt me a little bit because I want to run more. But I also can say, like, there's been times where I'm like, look, dude, we just need to sit here and give it 10 minutes. Yeah. Like that, Brent, shout out to Brent Houlihan. He's definitely not on here. But Brent Houlihan.
Brent definitely not on here?
Because Brent's old. I mean, he's like in his 40s. He doesn't know how YouTube works. But,
God. Well, there go 4 subscribers from tonight's live stream.
Yeah. It's Bass and Bourbon. We have no PC here. But that was something that Brent taught me, like just a little positive mindset, like a little saying that he would have on the boat. He's like, Dirds, just give it 10 minutes, dude. 10 minutes. 10 minutes and we'll catch another fish. And like there's been times this year where I've stuck on a spot and it's like, just give it 10 minutes. I've said it to myself. Just give it 10 minutes. There's one here.
What is your secret to doing that? Like what is it that makes you have the ability to do that?
I think
it is stubbornness or is it stupidity?
It's stubbornness and having enough confidence to know, dude, everything's setting up right. It makes sense. They have to be here. Right? How do I catch them? There's something that I'm doing wrong because the area is not wrong. Like it makes sense. They have to be here. How do I catch them?
So talking about the area being right, I know you had an experience where you knew there was a really good area where guys were catching fish, and you went out and you had waypoints, and you didn't catch them. Talk to me. Like this isn't a knock on you, but it's really an interesting topic, right? Like having the specific area, you know that guys are catching like bags, winning bags of fish there, and just not catching them.
I think part of that is I'm not spending enough time there, and I'm not spending the right time there.
So like example here is if I'm having a point, right? Like if someone tells me, okay, this point's good, like I just went out and caught a bunch of fish on it, you need to stop and check it. And I go out and fish it, and for some reason I can't get a bite. Right? Like that's kind of what we're talking about in this instance.
Yeah, if someone gives you a waypoint trying to catch someone else's fish.
Yeah.
Well, and here's the thing that's funny about that is I literally sent that guy a picture. I'm like, hey, these are the areas that I want to check out. And he's like, here, I'll shorten the curve for you. This one, this one, this one, and this one. And I went out there and I'm like, I got one big bite off of one of those spots before I even talked to you about this. But I think part of it is I was only spending like an hour and a half, 2 hours after work.
Is it about like the total understanding of the spot?
I think that's a big part of it, right? Is like I don't understand how those fish set up. I don't understand what cadence they want. And I'm not spending enough time to sit there and beat my head against the wall and go, right, this is the right spot.
Well, I did the same thing at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Like we were up north, we decided we were going to come back down south, and
Yeah.
I was given very, very, very specific instructions on how to catch big fish on this lake, and we blanked.
Yeah, we literally zeroed there.
Like, did not catch a single fish.
We caught bass, but we didn't catch keepers.
Tiny ones, like
we didn't catch any keepers,
right? And it goes back to I literally didn't know how it set up, and I think it actually hindered me more than it helped me.
Because
because I'm so like mad at that point. I'm like, I know this dude is a reputable person that I know is catching them. I'm seeing pictures.
Yeah.
And I'm not able to go catch these fish because I don't understand why why in my mind they're setting up on this spot.
Yeah.
What they need to be eating, what are they doing, why are they there, how are they setting up on it, what is the exact sweet spot? Like knowing all these key factors are really what make a sweet spot a sweet spot.
Exactly.
And if you don't know it, you might have the best spot in the lake that someone gave you and never catch a fish off.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's such an interesting topic as a whole because, man, like there are so many days I can think of where I sucked.
It is
having or fishing the best spot in the lake and someone else comes and wrecks it there.
Mm-hmm. It is so hard to catch someone else's fish.
It is. It's miserable. I almost would rather not have people's waypoints at that point.
Yeah, I would almost have you not tell me. Don't
just
tell
be
me
like,
about
hey,
your
the
spot.
lake's really good.
Yeah, don't tell me about your spot. Please don't.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to try to fish it. Because that's what we all do.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are.
Yeah,
We'll
I know. I've looked at people's Instagram photos.
Mm-hmm.
I've looked at YouTube videos. It's happened.
And when have you ever caught them off?
I can't say that I've ever really said to myself, I went to this spot on a YouTube video. The first place I ever did this, I was going to fish Pickwick Lake in Alabama for the national championship of college fishing.
Yeah.
Now, granted, this was so long ago, like I wasn't actually a good angler at this point.
Yeah.
Not that I'm great now, but like I wasn't good at this point at all. And they were ledge fishing.
Yeah.
I looked at this video. I knew what creek he was in. And I looked and I pinpointed the exact ledge he was on.
Yeah.
And I graphed it, and it looked like they said it should look on, your 2D and your side imaging. Didn't catch a single fish on it.
Mm-hmm.
But like, we all do it.
Yeah, we all do. But the point is like, if you don't find it for yourself and you don't actually understand how it sets up, you're never going to be that good, A, on that spot, and B, as an angler, right? Like, if you just, and I don't want to get on a soapbox about like poaching people's spots or whatever.
Do it.
But like, to be honest, like, if you don't figure it out for yourself, you're not going to understand how that sets up. You're not going to maximize it to its full potential. And at the end of the day, in the long haul, you're not going to get better. Don't get me wrong. Like, I've given spots out to, like that day on Sugar where I had, 24, 25 pounds. I gave you areas. I didn't give you the final detail on how to catch them.
But I caught them my own way and still caught it like a 23-pound bag.
Yeah.
Because I caught them in a general area doing a similar thing.
Yeah.
But
I didn't say
I started to understand why those fish were there. Right? Like if you gave me exactly what I had to do,
or I just said, "Here's the spot," it would have been different.
Exactly.
Because I can remember you asking me, you're like, "Hey, do you think they'd eat a square bill?" And I'm like, "Dude, it's a reaction bite deal. You need to be banging it off a cover. They're in this depth of water, and they're really relating to points. Go find them. It's not. Here's a waypoint."
At this point, him and I weren't even good friends.
Yeah,
he wants to make it sound like he gave me waypoint. No, I'm just kidding. But I think you're right, though. So, what do you think is your biggest strength? Like, what do you think is the coming out of 2021, going into 22, is your biggest strength that you can grow on and trust to put fish in the boat and catch fish?
Wrong comment.
It's from my boy in the pros.
Oh, I would say my biggest strength is honestly like when I fish with my gut, I can figure them out. And the thing is I just need to learn to listen to that more.
Yeah.
I think really, and like all those minute micro details, right? Like I pick up on them and I see them, but I don't always listen to them, and that's what's frustrating, right? Is like that tournament that I fished with my dad, and my fish.
Sorry, I'm thinking about what we talked about before we got on live. You
Yeah,
look like Lieutenant Dan with no legs, and you can see
I do
my
look like-
ankle.
I do.
Oh God, that's funny. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you look like freaking Kenny Chesney, or no, not Kenny Chesney. Sorry, Jake Owen, barefoot blue jean night.
God. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Way off track.
The point that I'm making is when I fished that tournament with my dad, and I'm like, dude, I've got these spots. Like, I went out there and practiced,
Yeah.
and I had 15 pounds, or
Yeah,
14, 15 pounds in the first half hour on these certain spots. Well, they killed the grass, and the key to catching those fish was you needed that grass. Well, I caught fish doing another deal in the first 2 hours, and I didn't listen to it until literally the last hour of the day, and then it's like, oh my god, why didn't I listen to
So is
that
this your
bite?
biggest strength or something you want to?
It's both, right? Like it's being able to notice those things but
That's
not listening to them, right? Like you know it in your head, but you don't listen to it. You're like,
times where I did this.
yeah, you're like, oh, dude, like that was just a fluke. Ha! He was specifically on that one thing. Nah, I'm not going to try to replicate that. I'm going to do that thing that I did 2 weeks ago because it was working then.
You and I are so different though in the way that we fish, right? Like the way that we fish is almost we have very similar styles of physically fishing.
It's
right?
funny,
Like
yeah,
flipping
yeah.
a bait or making a cast
Or like when I
retrieving-
literally tack the trolling motor 2 feet
Yeah,
over because I'm like, oh, Ben's about to make this cast.
Right. We know the way each other fish. We fish entirely different. Like you are so much more like observant, almost gut reactionary about certain things. I am ultra logical. Like if I get a bite, A has to link to B, has to link to C, and then I can put the puzzle together and it can start to run it around the lake and make it make sense.
Yeah.
But I'm not gut instinct about very much.
Yeah.
I might run down the lake and be like, oh, that spot looks good, but most of the time, like I know what should look good based on what my map tells me.
Well, and that's so yeah, we literally work in opposite fashion, right? Like that pattern that I figured out way up north, was literally me going, well, I can't catch them. I've run all the best looking stuff on the map. I'm just gonna go down the bank, and there's wind blowing on it. It's dark outside. I'm gonna throw a chartreuse bladed spinnerbait and just burn it.
And fish your style of fishing.
Yeah, just because like my gut's telling me to do that.
Yeah.
And then. But on the flip side, that's burned me too. Like my gut tells me this is what needs to happen, and then I don't do it because, like you said, A, B sometimes doesn't equal C in my brain. Sometimes I jump from B to G.
Yeah, sometimes you just like your gut reaction tells you to do this, and you hero.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes your gut reaction tells you to do this, and you zero. Right? Like
yeah, that's an interesting thing to think about, right? Is your biggest strength also your biggest weakness?
I think it is. I think it goes hand in hand, right? Because when things don't play into your biggest strength, what do you have to fall back on?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like when your biggest strength is being a power fisherman who's ultra logical, if it gets finesse, and like if it gets finesse, now you have to be logically finesse, right? But that's a lot harder to do
when that's not the way that your brain works.
Right. Exactly.
And I think like that's why we fish well together, man. It's like we're both like opposite ends, and like where you're dropping the ball, I'm picking it up, and when I'm dropping it, you're picking it back up, and it's like, okay, boom, then we're back on the rails.
You look at my strengths as an overall angler and as 2021. The first one is going to be forward-facing sonar. Number 2 is going to be my ability to logically put a puzzle together. Like I'm starting to get more pieces to complete more puzzles.
Yeah.
Right. Like I'm starting to fish more areas, different bodies of water to be effective on glacial lakes that set up, in a certain way, and get better on a Great Lake that sets up a certain way. And like again, man, like that burns me as well as it helps me.
Yeah.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's so many times where I'm just like, okay, this doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not that good at fishing gut reaction, and I can't go make it happen because, like when we went up to the Leschino Islands or Hessel Bay, dude, it didn't make sense. Logically, did not make sense.
Yeah.
Maybe gut reaction, like that we should have just gone to the outer bay.
Yeah.
Made sense, but that just.
Or it's like, from smallmouth, we're going largemouth fishing.
Yeah.
This is some really good look.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, though? Because we didn't spend, and that was like you remember me saying it, like, well, hell, we just saw a picture of a really big largemouth. Let's go largemouth fishing, smallmouth, whatever.
Yeah.
And it is what it is, right? Like, you learn, but two polar opposite perspectives.
So if you had a piece of advice based on this year's success or failure for people,
that's a good question.
What would it be? And what would you tell someone based on the way that your season went this year? For me, the biggest thing is going to be willing to try new baits and techniques, and be willing to trust yourself in your abilities to catch fish, right? Because the best days I ever had this season were fishing new lures and either fishing new bodies of water or fishing new areas on old bodies of water.
Yeah.
Right? And those were situations where, one, I was putting myself in a little bit of an uncomfortable position fishing new baits, but two, I was also going out and just fishing the very specific conditions that I was fishing. And I know that's so cliche, but like really what it boils down to is like trusting your abilities to catch them, and what has gotten you to the point that you're at right now is going to carry you to more success than trying to force things that should work.
Yeah. I would say my biggest advice is, and part of that is like trust. It's the same, along the same vein, like trusting your gut is, if it looks good, fish it. If it makes sense, like if it looks good, fish it. Whether that's an area, that's a spot, that's a bait, like the way that we figured out that deal up in Traverse City a couple of years ago, me and Ron, is literally me going in my head, it's awful quiet. I should throw a quiet bait. Seriously, that is literally
so funny, dude. I can't imagine where we would be right now had that one moment not happened where you cast a hair jig out and had to light a cigarette.
Yep.
Like, think of where we would be.
And that was literally in my head going, man, it's really quiet right now. I'm going to throw a really quiet lure.
It was so eerily quiet when we got out there.
That was like when, you remember you, me, Caleb, and then we met up with Brian and Connor up north the day after we went and caught them in the cold. And this isn't to dog on you, but this goes back to what we were talking about, right? Is you picked up that LV500 the next day, and I'm like, what are you doing? Because you remember, it was the same thing, though. It was glass calm.
I cast it out, and you could hear it
all the way at the end.
The second that you started reeling and retrieving that bait, you could hear the LV just...
You can hear an LV500 50 yards away underwater.
And the water was glass clear.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
But that's the same thing, right?
You hear the blades spinning on an oak shed.
But that goes back to what we were talking about. Like the day before, that was the deal. That was the deal, was that LV. And getting it stuck in your head, like, well, we caught him on it yesterday. You know, it should work. Because I'm pretty sure I had one tied on. And I'm pretty sure I threw one too. But then we had them follow a freaking hair jig up to the boat and watched them turn. And it's like, and then that wind kicked up and we caught him on, well, Caleb caught him on jerk bait.
I'm thinking to myself, though, if we would have known then what we know now, we could catch them.
But that's part of the experience, right?
Is it really that much fun?
It's not fun, but that's part of like the growing pains. And like, God, what an idiot I was back then.
Never forget about the underestimating power of the replenishment of the 70-degree bush light.
That is true. And then going to B-dubs and having to let all that loose not even the next morning, dude. That night.
B-dubs is the worst food to possibly eat when you get off the water.
Yeah. But we still do it. A lot.
At least once a season.
You know what is not? Subway. Can we just give a quick shout
Let's
out to
give it-
Subway?
So if Subway wants to sponsor us, that would be totally fine.
Yeah.
We get Subway or A&W with Big Booty Judy
Yes.
at least 6 times a season, if not
Mhm.
more.
Oh, more than that.
If
It
not
has gotten
more.
to the point where it's like Pavlov's dogs, where when I get off the lake and I'm like, you know what sounds really good? An Italian BMT from Subway on flatbread.
That's so true. So, what is a hole in your game that you want to get better at next season? Like, what's one thing that you say to yourself, okay, 2021 was okay, did okay, but if I wouldn't have done this, I would have caught more fish.
I really think it is not listening to yesterday. Like fishing today. I think that is
so hard.
It
That
is so
the
hard.
hardest thing to do, right? Especially, I think that's what separates good pros from
Really good pros.
really seriously, insanely good pros.
And yeah, like you said, it's the hardest thing to do. But I don't think what I'm lacking is being able to read fish, being able to read water, being able to throw a certain lure, being able to whatever. Like, yeah, could I get better at casting? But is that at the end of the day really going to make an exponential difference?
If you had to clear your waypoints, right? Like if you had to clear your waypoints every season,
Greg Hackney does that, doesn't he?
Yeah. Do you think it would be helpful? Brent Ayler does it as well. Do you think it would be helpful? Do you think it would hinder you? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I can't give him up. I can't. You can't give him up because like you work so hard to find those certain areas, and I don't think it's necessarily clear in waypoints. I think it's.
Do you think it would even make a difference, right? Like, because I
can still find them. I
would go back
know
to
how
that
to line it
general
up,
area and I would figure it out. Right?
Mhm.
Like, I'd be like, oh God, I'm struggling. I need to go have this specific waypoint. But I can't tell myself, like, man, how many times have I gone out and been like, I'm just going to run these waypoints because these 4 should be good. And I go to those 4 and they're doing something really weird.
Yeah.
And I catch them doing something totally different.
I'll tell you, when I went up to the lake where you and Caleb and I figured out the jerkbait this fall, the only reason I caught those fish is because I had those waypoints from then, and I didn't catch them on the waypoints,
right?
But I knew, okay, here's my areas that I can kind of rotate around.
That's so hard, though. That's so hard not fishing history.
Because it worked. That's the thing, is it worked, and there's a reason that it worked. But being the hardest thing to do, and this is the hole in my game, is being able to separate yesterday and today. You know what I mean?
It's being able to separate the conditions and factors that actually made them bite from today. Right? Like, there's so many times where I've looked and I'm like, okay, August 22nd.
No, that's your stuff on the bay.
This is what they were doing on August 22nd. This is what they should be doing right now.
Yeah.
And then they're doing something totally different.
That's your stuff where you caught your 27, 28, 29 pound bags, right?
Yeah.
You know, like, but that it's not the same. It's not the same.
Yes, it's not. It's definitely not. But like, what were those factors and conditions? And really, do I think I'm going to be able to line them up again, or do I care to even line them up again? Or am I better off just saying screw it? And like, I don't know the right decision to make. Yeah. It's so frustrating because I don't know the right decision to make an adjustment.
That is such a tough. It's such a tough thing to think about, right? Do you give up your?
It's not even so much about giving up the waypoints. Even if I didn't have the waypoints anymore.
Yeah.
Do I just say screw those spots and just like, how do you do that? How do pros have the ability to do that? Because what it boils down to is my ability to separate the physical conditions and really understand why specifically were they there. What was the weather like? What were bait fish doing?
So
what was the wind doing? And I think this goes back to Aaron Diddy's point. What was the wind doing to move those bait fish into that area? Or what was the weather front doing?
Yeah. So that's where I think something that I improved on in 2021 is I started taking those notes. Dude, it's not even like you and I had talked about like indexing them. Like, how do you actually pull and extrapolate that data? And I started putting in that Google Doc where I could search keywords, like do Control F and be like, or different
Yeah.
areas, and but it also makes you think more critically, right? Like that stuff. For a perfect example, like that stuff that I've ended out the year on, flipping that jig for largemouth in that milfoil, they weren't on it in October. But knowing what I know,
Which is what? Like,
that
what made you do that? Why'd you go flip that milfoil in October?
because it's green grass, largemouth should be in green grass, right? But it was full of pike. I don't know why. And then when I went up north and those pike were on that smallmouth stuff, and then it started to change, and I was pounding it, remember? And all of a sudden I catch it. I didn't necessarily smash the smallmouth on it, but the pike were gone, and I'm like, dude, those largemouth have to get back on that because you know that they do. It's a wintering area.
Yeah.
And eventually they did. And I knew that waypoint would be good. I didn't know exactly what conditions, but being able to take that log book and be like, it's not necessarily, the lake doesn't even set up relatively similar at all.
Right.
But understanding, okay, this is happening here. I bet you it's going to happen here too.
So, looking forward into 22, what are your biggest things you want to do? What are you, like, maybe not necessarily goals, right? I think that takes a little bit more reflection and like refinement. But like, what are the biggest things you want to accomplish or start to look at for 22?
I guess like
it's hard to set goals, right? Like,
Yeah.
the more I set goals for fishing, the more I end up disappointed because like there's so many other things it relies upon than just going out
and yeah, because like me, like I've been starting to fish tournaments more and more, and like I don't even say like I want to win or do X amount of well in tournaments. It's just when it happens, it happens.
Right.
And as much as I say like next year I want to do a 7-7, catch a 7-pound largemouth, 7-pound smallmouth. It'll happen when it happens. Do
I
I
just want to catch a 7.
Yeah.
Like,
I want to do 7-7. That's the big goal.
I want to catch 30. I want to catch a 7-pound smallmouth and I want to catch 30 pounds. That's been my goal and will probably be my goal until it happens. And then the goal bar has to raise.
Yeah.
Outside of physical, like, fish class, right? Because that will never change.
Yeah.
Outside of physical fish class, like, what do you want to improve upon as an angler? What do you want to see yourself grow as or do differently? Or
I wrote this down, and this is my biggest goal for next year. And it's honestly like it's kind of a hard one to do. Is take 3 new people fishing.
They've never fished, or you've never fished with them.
New people, just they've never really done it before. They want to do it, or they've done it, and by that, and I know where you're going with it, is like a guy like Brennan, for example. Like he came out here, whatever. Like, that's not what I'm talking about.
You're talking about people that never fished, never experienced fishing before.
Yeah, or experience fishing to the same magnitude, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Right. Because I always have a goal of fishing with new, like, different people.
Yeah.
Like, my goal, I would like to fish with 3 to 5 people that have never put in my boat before.
Mm-hmm.
Right? From a different perspective. Not because I care about other people.
Yeah. Yeah, I know you don't.
But because I want to learn, right? Like, fishing with other people helps me be a better angler.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds really selfish. It is really selfish.
But
I want to be a better fisherman.
Yeah.
Right? And I feel like that's the way to do it.
Because
we've talked about this, dude, you and me. The amount of extra information we're gaining from each other is so marginal at this point.
Yeah.
We fish together because we enjoy fishing together and we fish well together.
Mm-hmm. It's not like when Caleb comes up and you're like...
We're not like learning from each other on a constant basis.
Yeah.
I can't say that I've learned as much from you as I learned with Brennan and Bowen.
Mm-hmm. This year.
Right?
Yep.
And I think it's because you fish with different people with differing experiences on the water and different perspectives and different strengths and different, things. So that's a definite goal. Like 3 to 5 people that have never fished with.
Yeah.
This year it was Jake Beebe, it was Trent, which Trent I fished with one time last year, but like
it wasn't
more
the
or less
same.
new. Zach Hall fish with him. I've never fished
That
with him.
dude is goofy as hell, and
Goofy as hell, great with a jerkbait.
yeah, that dude, I like that guy a lot.
What's that comedian? Theo Von, aka Zach Hall.
Yeah, exactly. And then Brennan. Who else did I fish with this year?
Caleb came up, Alex came up, but they weren't new.
Caleb, you just learn from because Caleb's so good. But
And it's funny we keep bringing Caleb up, and it ties right into the point that you're making of fishing with different people makes you a better angler, and not to just like stroke Caleb off, but like we've rubbed off on Caleb too. Like Caleb's definitely taking things back to Tennessee that we do that he never did before.
I want to give a huge shout out to Jig Squad. Jig Squad's in here. For those of you guys that don't know, Jig Squad is a brand new YouTube channel, brand new Instagram, all about making lures. And he has a podcast going on the 30th. I believe it's 7:30 p.m. Go over there, join that. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. But it's a channel that's going to be growing all about making baits and making jigs. So go check him out, Instagram, YouTube. He's going to have some really cool stuff coming. I also want to go up with Adam. Adam's a totally different angler who comes with different like skill sets and experiences, and just going to Canada is really cool.
And he's a good dude, man. That guy's just
he's
a
not
great
a
guy.
good dude. He's such a jerk.
Wow. Okay.
And then I guess my final goal is like really find I don't even know if this is possible, right? Like I don't know if it's possible to be better at trusting your gut instinct.
Mm-hmm.
I think you train it, but like deep down, I am a logical person.
Yeah.
Point A.
But that's the
B,
same.
C.
It's literally the same goal that I have, right? Like it's just like how do you really do that more? And I don't know.
I just think
Like how do you train that?
How do you train your gut instinct, or how do you train the logical aspect of yourself?
How do you train your logical aspect to
I
listen
don't
to your
know.
gut?
I don't know that you should. I don't know that you should or like do. I think it's all about experiences, right? Like experiences to grow your ability to trust your gut. And for me, it's more so grow my experiences to be able to be more logical.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like it's stupid, but like, why would you want to change your internal nature? Right?
It's funny because like what we talked about before this live stream is like this book that I read for work. It's called Why Make Eagles Swim, and essentially it's like, do you listen to what your strengths are and find people around you that can strengthen your weaknesses, or do you try to train your weaknesses? And it's funny like to hear you talk and just go, Ben, you're saying the same thing that I'm saying, but backwards. And it's like, how do you train your logical to listen to your gut? And it's like, how do I train my gut to listen to my logical? And it's like,
it's such a fascinating concept
mm-hmm.
discussion.
And just to go back real quick to like the take 3 brand new people fishing. Do you remember when we took my dad out this spring? Like,
yeah,
that was
cool.
Such a good moment for me. And like just to watch him like get it and like learn it as he went throughout the day. And like that was really, really cool to me. And just to be able to share it, because I remember like you remember being that kid or that person that looking back at it, you're like, I was no freaking good, but somebody took me out.
Yeah.
And I was able to get into it and whatever.
I laugh because I look at the way that I got into bass fishing as like a real bass fishing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like 18-year-old, 19-year-old kid in college, had a college fishing team. And the person that kind of took a gamble was Steve and Andy.
Yeah.
I was Andy's tournament partner on Thursday nights.
Oh, gosh.
Every Thursday night, all summer long with Andy. I didn't even know, like, the basics.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I didn't know the
you were
basics.
tying shoestring knots back in the day.
I'm not kidding, man. And for Andy to go out on a limb, now Andy and I are in a different position, right? Like, Andy and I talk on, like, a strategic level now.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I was talking on the strategic level then. I was literally like that kid in the back of his boat.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And to give like
It's almost embarrassing. Like, oh my god,
seriously,
like,
yeah.
I was so green.
Like I think about like my Andy was Brandon Rose
Yeah.
taking me into Team Bass, and like I can remember throwing a frog in like the first week of May over grass patches. And I can remember him saying, he's like, it's a little too cold for that, but still letting me do it. And then, I remember catching him on a Rapala DT Thug. Remember those old Rapalas that had the big freaking extra EWG on the back?
Yeah.
I can remember catching him on that on an outside grass line. And seeing the bass boats and seeing like a tournament and being like, gosh, this is what I wanted. This is cool.
I was a kid.
Yeah. And like, okay, how do I give that back? And I don't, and not necessarily to that magnitude, but like,
Ooh, that's actually like the more we talk about it, like I start to get chills. Like, how do you do that?
mm-hmm.
Right? Like, how are you that to that person? But same token, this is gonna sound so bad, but are there more kids like us?
It doesn't matter. That's the question that I ask back to you. Doesn't matter. You only need to take them once. And it's not necessarily to stroke your own ego, but hey, you put it out there. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, think about you and I. Like, if
I think the validation that comes from that, like Thad, I did that with Thad,
mm-hmm.
and like seeing where Thad is now is
Yeah.
kind of cool.
Yeah.
Right. Like, but at the same point, Thad had a true passion for it.
Yeah.
Like, how do you find someone that
you don't? They just show up. You know what I mean? And like,
that's crazy. Interesting, but crazy.
Yeah.
Oh,
I think it's just you just put that out there. Like,
I think that also, I've been getting a lot of questions about whether or not I'm going to do that meetup again.
Dude, I think you should.
The meetup was really cool. It was stressful.
Yeah.
Honest to God, it's stressful because I stress about like if you're not here on time for
I
our
know.
Saturday morning, go to the lake. Like,
I thought about it like when I was on the way here, and I'm like, I texted you and I was like, I'm gonna be there between 7 and 7:15.
I'm over here like rushing around trying to get the
Oof.
set up, and but no, like it was so cool to be able to take Jason Emery in my boat, but getting someone out who may not have the opportunity to do that.
Mm-hmm. It's bigger than fishing, man.
It is. That's crazy.
That's my big goal. That's my one big goal.
Who's this guy?
Mike
starts to talk about community holes and pros' abilities to fish different areas, and breaking them down really quickly and basically learn from past experiences.
I was listening to a
one of my YouTube videos.
Not yours. Sorry, buddy. I was listening to Todd Castledine actually, and he talked about this exact topic, like pros going to bodies of water, and he said it like about him fishing on San Rayburn. He's like, why is he fishing that? And pros will do that, or people from out of town in general, just because they're like, they never fished it before, but they just fished their gut and they found an area and they're like, man, I'm catching a couple of here and there, and it's not necessarily a community hole, but they're catching fish out of it. And especially in bigger boat fields, I think that matters more than small local stuff.
True.
Mm-hmm. But I do think in small local stuff, when you get 30, 40, 50 boats, like that Leelanau tournament, I mean, sometimes there's 8, 9 guys in one spot, and it's like, okay.
And the impact that has on especially community holes.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, it may be phenomenal when there's one boat on it.
Mm-hmm.
When there's 5 boats on it.
You can't split fish in certain spots. Yeah. Some spots you can, though, but so not all of them.
Final topic. What is one bait that you're going to take from 2021 and really like put in your hand and continue to learn? What is one bait you're going to be willing to kind of put down and say, maybe it doesn't fit my style? And what is one bait you want to learn?
I'd say the A-rig is one. I can't make it one. The A-rig and the crankbait are 2 that I really want to continue to push on multiple lakes. So I've got a couple that I feel like it really shines. Honestly, um, one that I want to put down. I honestly can't say that I want to put one down. And here's why is like everything that I throw, I have confidence in. If I don't have confidence in it, why am I throwing it? So if I'm going to put it down, I've already put it down. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's some that I pushed pretty hard to learn. It's
Yeah.
funny that you talk about the A-rig. That either that or the spinnerbait are going to be one that I really want to start to put down.
Really?
Yeah,
Why?
the A-rig just never played for me. It was never one of those baits that I said to myself, "Man, this is the bait that I need to be throwing to catch him."
Mm-hmm.
I always could say to myself, "There's something easier and more effective that I could throw and catch fish in those areas," because I've never experienced a situation where I'm like, "This is what I need to be throwing."
Yeah.
So for me, the A-rig is really kind of tossed out the back door, or a free rig.
Yeah.
Or a free rig. I want to put that down. The benefits of a free rig don't make sense to me, especially as a fun angler, like where I'm not seriously competing for money. I just don't see the benefits. It's hard to fish. The hookup percentage is not great from my experience.
Yeah. They eat that weird.
They eat it when it's like sort of penduluming and rolling.
Yeah.
And so you hook them funny and like you have limited feel. I just don't think the benefits really outweigh the distractions, right? Like hooking them in the bottom jaw, hooking them in the tongue, hooking them on like the outside part of it, like
the inside outside part. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like it.
What's a bait you want to learn?
Shallow cranking. That's the
Square
biggest
bill
one.
cranking or like
Yeah, like square billing.
lipless cranks in grass or what?
See, for me, if I'm gonna throw a lipless crank in grass, why not throw a chatterbait?
It's so different though.
To me,
It's
in my
the
head,
same, but
it's
totally
not.
different.
Yeah, it's the same but totally different. I think it's a similar
It's like
presentation.
Shallow cranking.
Yeah, shallow cranking.
Do you think we have a lot of lakes that lend themselves to it?
I don't think so. That's the thing.
I
It's
think
like
there's some rivers that you could do it in.
I know that's what I'm talking about.
There's some really good rivers that I think will lend themselves to it.
And that's why I
And I
want
really have thought about these rivers quite a bit this winter. Is like,
dude, they're there. I think that's the biggest. That's one of my big 2022 goals, like that I've talked to you about, is expanding on.
not even the Saginaw.
Yeah, just in general. Like even looking up
Well, I'll give them away. You have like Loud Dam Pond, Hook Dam
not
Pond,
even just
Alcona.
the whole Osabo River chain. Now that the
Yeah.
Tittabawassee chain is gone, there's that one. Is it the Muskegon River that feeds into like Croton and Hardy and all those ones on the west side? You know, like in my head, those all have to stack up similar, right? To what Sanford and Wixom were. And as much as we talk about like we hated Sanford and Wixom, they were good fisheries.
They're great fisheries.
Yeah.
I wish I had them back.
What lake do you consistently have like 17 pounds to win a tournament
Yeah,
on?
you don't.
Not anymore.
So shallow cranking for you.
Yeah. What do you got?
For me, a bait that I'm going to keep in my hand and want to learn some more is jerk bait fishing. Right? Like I feel like I'm comfortable with the jerk bait, and I can make a jerk bait do certain things, but like I really want to expand on it. Like, how do I make that Berkeley sink to where I want it to sink?
Mm-hmm.
How do I make it fish the way that I want it to fish? How do I take that Berkeley and mix a jackal in, or mix a vixen in, or vision in, or mix?
Yeah.
Like, how do I really make the bait do what I want it to do?
And how do you,
As it relates to forward-facing sonar, right? Because let's face it, like I fish a jerk bait a lot, but a lot of the times the reason I'm fishing it is for forward-facing.
Yeah. I don't know how deep you want to go into it, but there's some stuff that we saw out there, like that tool mixed with that tool is a deadly freaking combo.
Yeah.
It's such a maneuverable bait, and understanding how to maneuver it. I feel like that's how, like when you hear guys that are really, really, really good at fishing topwater and understanding how to work a topwater, being able to see it and understanding like have you ever heard about guys like walking their spooks underneath docks and like how to hit them to get them to jog, like stuff like that.
Guys that are really, I want to be a specialist, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
forward-facing sonar, I already consider myself somewhat a specialist on. I think understanding the jerkbait better makes me more of a specialist in forward-facing sonar. Learning the baits that work best with forward-facing will make me more of a specialist in forward-facing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. Because yeah, I don't know if we want to go down that rabbit hole, but I definitely, yeah, I see what you're saying. Because not every bait.
Not every bait is useful on forward-facing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like every bait can catch fish, but like to truly have a bait that works with forward-facing, like, I'll give it away. Like you need a bait that you can pinpoint a piece of cover structure with.
Yep.
Drop shot, a ball head jig with a swim bait, or like a straight tail on the back. Or
And I wouldn't even say a swim bait.
just anything that you can very directly pinpoint a
Mhm.
specific area, right?
Yep.
That's number one. Number two, you need a bait that can hover or hold in place if fish are up in the column. And you need a bait that can have drawing power when those fish aren't necessarily immediately committal.
Yeah.
That's the power of a jerkbait. That's why a jerkbait is so popular on forward facing.
And I will say, like we go back to learning from different anglers. That's the biggest thing that I learned from you is how to catch and read fish using forward-facing sonar.
It's so unique,
Yeah,
right? Like it's almost bed fishing. It's
but
almost
it's
being able to read looking at fish.
yes, okay.
Not
Because the
necessarily
only
bed fishing,
other
but-
time that you really see what you're seeing is when you're bed fishing, and the reason that
Or chasing them and stalking them in shallow water.
yeah, but how many
Understanding
guys
the attitude
really
of the fish,
yeah.
right? And so like,
Mm-hmm.
and the other one, the final one is a bait that you can hover in the column.
Mm-hmm.
A jerk bait does that as well.
Yep.
So does a very lightweighted swim bait. The benefits of
Yeah.
a lightweighted swim bait are the fact that it literally hangs.
Mm-hmm.
The tail's counterbalanced to that bait. And so you can put an 1/8 ounce head in it instead of it being an 1/8 ounce. Fishing
Fish
it on-
is like a
fish is like exactly
Mhm.
what 3/32.
Yeah.
So basically, there's so many baits that you can really modify to make
Yeah.
it work with live forward-facing sonar. But those are really like
Oof, we ended up some juice there, buddy.
But a bait that I want to learn is a dark sleeper style bait, Agent E style bait.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we had Edwin on Alex's live, one thing we talked about was like this is going to be a new type of bait that's going to
Category.
like a new category of baits.
Yeah.
Right, like an inside jig head style bait, like the Storm Wild Eye, and Dark Sleeper, like
A tube.
a tube to an
I
extent.
mean, I'm making
right?
a joke, but yeah.
It's going to be a new category of bait, so learning how to fish it.
That
I want to understand it because it is so powerful, not only for smallmouth but for largemouth too.
that bait fish is so different than
It has like a spiral on the fall,
unless you
what-
tight line it.
right? And there's so many unique applications with that thing. Where that's a bait that I really want to learn. Once I
That's
get my
interesting.
hands on some Agent E's, because I have about 90 dark sleepers in my boat. I don't
Mhm.
actually know how much they weigh. Like people have given them to me over the
Yep, same here.
throughout the
They're
times.
just in a bucket.
They're literally in a bag. Maybe they're in a Tupperware. But like I don't know how to fish them. I don't know where to fish them. I don't know what size they are. And the hook gap is so
I
small.
hate that hook on there. I love the bait, but God, I hate that hook.
I know. That's
I
the one
don't
thing I'm
have-
excited about the Agent E is it has a bigger hook gap.
Yeah.
And I'm like, thank God, I can put this thing on a jig rod and I can
Well,
fish a jig.
and I don't get it because I really haven't lost him on a dark sleeper, but I just don't like that hook. But yeah, no, that's a good point. It's
It's a
not
different bait.
it's not a swim bait. It's not a tube. It's
It's like in between a jig and a bottom bouncing swim bait.
yeah,
Like really
yeah.
interesting. So I think that's how we're gonna end it, man. I mean, I think we covered pretty much everything. Like our look back at 2021, starting to look forward into 22. Touched on some things that are going to be coming in the future on Bass and Bourbon, which is live scope and the ethics and how do you use it to be successful.
Mhm.
So that's a good place to end it. And no one I really would rather have on for episode number 1. We fished together a ton. And
That was
this
fun.
is a lot of fun. It's just pretty light, loose conversation. My goal for these guys is to end up doing Bass and Bourbon once a week and possibly do like a very in-depth interview style where we talk about a specific technique or bait and how to be more successful with it once a week or once every other week with people that are specialists in it. So whether that's forward-facing sonar with me or drop shotting or hair jig fishing or get Dirds on an episode to talk about throwing an A-rig or a spinnerbait or how to break down rivers. I really want to do that. I think it would be fun, and I think people can learn from it. So you get both ends of the spectrum. Bass and bourbon where we have a little fun, have a drink, hang out, and then in-depth version where Dirds can sit there and nerd out on some baits. So.
Oh yeah.
But that's where we're going to end it, guys. Thank you for watching. If you guys are listening on the podcast version, go over, check out the YouTube channel. If you guys are watching live on the YouTube channel, go over, just, drop a follow in case you miss an episode or two on the YouTube. You guys can follow it over there on your favorite streaming app. As always, thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions or comments, drop them in the YouTube channel, comment section down below. Either Dirds or I are going to go down there and answer those for you. As always, take care, Titlines. God bless.
Pursue your passion.